"Do not feed her. She is not a customer." Preston Doyle said it loud enough for the whole diner to hear, and for one cold second, every fork stopped halfway to every mouth. Rain hammered the windows of Calloway Kitchen on the edge of Millhaven, Georgia, turning the parking lot lights into trembling yellow halos. The place smelled of burnt coffee, warm grease, and old vinyl booze wiped clean too many times. In the corner sat a woman in a faded gray coat, her hair damp from the storm, her hands folded around an empty paper cup like it still held heat. Her name for that night was Rosa Bennett. At least that was the name she had given the waitress when she asked for something small, anything warm, and promised she would pay when she could. The waitress had looked at her shoes first, then her coat, then the empty cup. "This is not a shelter," she muttered. A man in a gray blazer laughed under his breath. Another woman pulled her purse closer. Rosa lowered her eyes, and that was when Marcus Webb walked in with $7.15 in his pocket, a plastic pharmacy bag under one arm, and the tired walk of a father who had already spent the day being strong. He did not look like a hero. His work jacket was faded at the shoulders. His boots had grease stains from the loading dock that never fully came out. His face carried the quiet exhaustion of double shifts, overdue bills, and bedtime stories read with an empty stomach. At home, his 7-year-old daughter, Amara, was waiting in their small apartment above a closed laundromat, probably drawing houses with yellow windows, the way she always did when she wanted the world to feel safe. Marcus had promised her supper. Not much. Chicken and rice soup, 2 slices of cornbread, maybe a little honey if the cook was feeling generous. It was supposed to be their last real meal before payday, stretched carefully, divided fairly, made cheerful by a father who knew how to smile around hunger. He ordered it at the counter and paid with folded bills and coins warmed by his palm. Then he heard Preston's voice. "Escort her out." Rosa stood slowly, cheeks flushed with shame, not anger. "I'm sorry," she said. "I just needed to sit for a minute." "Then sit outside," Preston replied. 3 quick chuckles followed. One from the man in the gray blazer, one from the waitress, one from a young assistant manager who wanted badly to be noticed. Marcus turned with the tray in his hands. The soup trembled inside the white bowl. The cornbread steamed against a paper napkin. He looked at Rosa, then at the door, where rain swept sideways across the sidewalk. He took one breath, the kind a man takes when he knows doing the right thing will cost him something. Then he walked to her table and set the tray down. "She's a customer tonight," Marcus said quietly. Preston looked him over and smiled without warmth. "And who exactly are you?" Marcus slid the spoon beside the bowl. "Just a man sharing dinner." "With what money?" Someone whispered. Marcus heard it. Rosa heard it. The whole room heard it. But Marcus only pulled the paper napkin from beneath the cornbread, folded one piece carefully, and tucked it into his jacket pocket for Amara. "Eat while it is hot," he told Rosa. She stared at him as if he had handed her something far greater than soup. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and second chances, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we are glad you are here. Now, back to Marcus Webb, because no one in that diner knew the woman they had just humiliated was Diane Calloway, chief executive officer of the company that owned every table, every sign, and every secret in that room. Marcus did not know her real name, and that mattered more than anyone in the room understood. If he had known she was Diane Calloway, if he had known her signature could open banks, fire executives, and move entire markets before breakfast, the gift might have looked smaller. But he knew nothing except that a woman was wet, hungry, and being made to feel invisible. So he stood there with his hands empty and his daughter's cornbread folded inside his jacket pocket, while Preston Doyle stared at him like poverty was something contagious. "You think this makes you noble?" Preston asked. Marcus did not answer right away. The rain kept tapping the glass. The fluorescent lights hummed above the counter. Somewhere in the kitchen, a metal pan clicked against the stove, sharp and lonely. "No," Marcus said at last. "I think it makes her warm for 10 minutes. A few people looked down, not because Marcus had shamed them loudly, but because he had refused to. That was always his way. He carried pain like a man carrying groceries up 3 flights of stairs, one step at a time, without asking who was watching. Marcus Webb had not planned on becoming the kind of father who counted quarters in the laundry room and pretended breakfast for dinner was a treat. 9 years earlier, he had worked as a machine technician at a bottling plant outside Millhaven, made steady money, and came home every evening to a little rented house with porch lights and laughter in the walls. Then his wife Denise got sick. Then the bills came. Then the house went. Then Denise was gone. And Marcus was left with Amara, a box of photographs, and a promise whispered beside hospital bed. Keep her safe, keep her kind, and never let the world teach her that love depends on money. Since then, every day had become a careful negotiation with survival. Rent first, electricity second, medicine when Amara's allergies flared, food whenever there was enough left to make it look normal. He worked overnight loading trucks at a regional distribution center off Route 9. Then picked up handyman jobs on weekends, fixing porch lights, loose cabinet doors, old dryers, and anything else people were willing to pay $30 for. Still, the apartment stayed cold near the windows, and the refrigerator made a hollow sound when Amara opened it, as if even the shelves were embarrassed. What Marcus feared most was not hunger. He could endure hunger. He had done it quietly enough that Amara almost never noticed. What he feared was the manila envelope on his kitchen table, the one from Family Services, the one that said his custody arrangement would be reviewed if he could not show stable income, proper housing conditions, and consistent meals. Those words had followed him all day. Stable, proper, consistent. Words built for people with savings accounts and second cars. Not for a father who patched his daughter's winter coat with thread from an old work shirt, and who already knew, without anyone saying it aloud, that a black father raising a daughter alone would be measured by a stricter ruler than most. Earlier that evening, Amara had stood by the window in her pajamas, holding a crayon drawing of the two of them at a long table covered in food. "Daddy," she had asked, "when payday comes, can we get the soup with the little dumplings?" Marcus had smiled as if that question did not break something small inside him. "We can do better than that, sweetheart," he said. "Maybe cornbread, too." She had grinned like he had promised her a castle. That was why he had stopped at the diner after his shift. That was why the meal mattered. It was not just soup. It was proof that he could still bring something home. And yet, standing under those buzzing lights, watching Rosa lift the spoon with trembling hands, Marcus felt no regret, only a quiet ache, and beneath it, a strange peace. Because a man with almost nothing still has a choice. He can guard the little he has until it turns hard inside him, or he can give one piece away and remember he is still human. Across the table, Rosa took one small bite, and her eyes filled with something she tried to hide. Marcus looked away to protect her dignity. Preston saw only a poor man wasting food on a poorer woman. But Rosa saw the folded napkin in Marcus's pocket, the careful way he saved half a piece of cornbread for someone he loved. And for the first time that day, the powerful woman beneath the old gray coat began to feel ashamed. Rosa lowered the spoon into the soup again, but her mind was no longer in the diner. It was back in the glass tower in Atlanta that morning, 38 floors above Streets, where people hurried with coffee cups and clean shoes, where no one looked hungry unless hunger had been turned into a chart. At 8:15, Diane Calloway had sat at the head of a polished walnut conference table, while Preston Doyle clicked through a presentation filled with smiling families, warm meals, and words like community, compassion, and access. The numbers were perfect, too perfect. Food waste was down, labor costs were down, public approval was up. Preston had stood beside the screen in a charcoal suit, his voice smooth as expensive leather. "The regional system is stronger than ever," he said. "Lean, efficient, profitable." Diane had watched the slide change to a photograph of a little girl holding a bowl of soup under the Callaway Kitchen logo, and something inside her had gone still. "What happened to the community meal program?" she asked. Preston did not blink. "Reallocated." "That was not my question." "It was underused," he said. "Expensive, difficult to manage. People abused it." 3 answers, quick and polished. 2 board members nodded. One assistant kept typing as if morality could be recorded in bullet points. Diane leaned back and looked at the photograph again. The girl in the picture was not from one of their stores. She knew it because she had approved that campaign herself 6 years ago, back when her father was still alive. And Calloway Foods still believed a restaurant had a duty beyond profit. Her father used to say food was never just food. It was welcome. It was dignity. It was the first language of mercy. But after his death, the company had grown faster than her grief could keep up with, and men like Preston had learned to wrap cold decisions in warm words. Then came the envelope. It had arrived without a return address, delivered to Diane's private office by security. Inside were 3 things: a printed complaint from a former warehouse worker, photographs of sealed trays of edible food dumped behind a store, and a handwritten note that said, "They are using your name to turn hungry people away." At the bottom was one more line. "Ask about Millhaven." Diane had read it twice, then a third time. "Who sent this?" She asked her chief of staff. "We do not know yet." "Does Preston know?" "Not unless you tell him." So Diane did not tell him. Instead, she canceled her afternoon meetings, removed the pearl earrings her mother had given her, left her phone and driver behind, and bought an old gray coat from a thrift store 3 blocks away. She took 93 cents in change, a bus pass, and the name Rosa Bennett, a name plain enough to disappear inside. All day, she walked into places that carried her family's logo. At one location, a cashier told her the restroom was for paying customers only. At another, a manager asked her to leave before lunch traffic arrived. At a market owned by her company, a security guard followed her down the canned goods aisle until she stepped back into the cold. No one shouted at first. That was the surprising part. Cruelty did not always begin with volume. Sometimes it came softly through a smile that did not reach the eyes, through a policy recited without mercy, through a door held open only so someone could be pushed out of it. By the time she reached Millhaven, rain had soaked through her shoes, and her pride had worn thinner than the coat around her shoulders. She had wanted the truth. Now the truth was sitting across from her in the form of a tired man who had given away the meal meant for his child. Marcus Webb did not know he had become evidence. He did not know that every quiet insult in that diner was being written into Diane's memory like testimony. He only stood near the table, steady and hungry, while Preston Doyle smiled at him as if goodness was a mistake that needed correcting. Preston stepped closer to Marcus's table, his polished shoes stopping just short of the puddle dripping from Rosa's coat. "You're making everyone uncomfortable," he said. Marcus looked around the diner at the lowered eyes, the half-finished plates, the phones quietly angled toward him. "No," Marcus said. "Hunger makes people uncomfortable. I'm just putting a bowl in front of it." The words were not loud, but they traveled. Rosa kept her hands around the spoon, afraid that if she moved too quickly, the whole fragile mercy of the moment would break. The soup was simple. Chicken with a little black pepper and a few soft grains of rice settled at the bottom. But to her, it tasted like something older than comfort. It tasted like being seen without having to prove she deserved it. Marcus stood beside the booth, not sitting, not hovering, just close enough to make sure Preston did not reach for the tray again. "You do this often?" Rosa asked quietly. Marcus glanced down at her. "Do what?" "Give away dinner." He gave a small, tired smile. "Only when someone needs it more." "And do you?" she asked. "Need it?" Marcus looked toward the window where rain ran down the glass in silver lines. For a moment, the diner noise thinned into the hum of lights and the soft scrape of a chair leg across tile. He could have lied easily. Men like him learned to lie kindly. "I already ate. I have food at home. I am fine." But something in Rose's eyes asked for truth without demanding it. "I have a little girl waiting," he said. "Her name is Amara." Rosa lowered the spoon. "Then you should take this back." "No, please eat." Few small words. No speech. No performance. Just a line drawn with quiet dignity. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and touched the folded cornbread wrapped in a paper napkin. He had tucked it away before Rosa could notice, but she had noticed everything tonight. The napkin had a purple crayon heart on one corner, uneven and bright, with the letter A written backward beside it. "She drew that?" Rosa asked. Marcus looked surprised, then softened. "This morning. She puts hearts on things she wants me to remember." "What did she want you to remember today?" He rubbed his thumb gently over the folded edge. To come home, he said. Rose's throat tightened. All day, she had been turned away by people trained to measure worth at the register. Now, a man with grease-stained boots and a custody notice, probably waiting on his kitchen table, was saving half a piece of cornbread like it was treasure. Marcus did not know that his small act was undoing years of Diane Calloway's carefully protected distance. He did not know that the woman in the gray coat had sat through $100 million negotiations without trembling, yet now could barely swallow because a child's crayon heart had made her feel the weight of every cold policy signed under her name. Preston folded his arms. This is sentimental nonsense, he said. Sir, I'm going to ask you one last time to leave. Marcus turned to him fully. And I'm going to ask you one last time to let her finish eating. The waitress froze near the coffee station. The assistant manager stopped smiling. Even a man in the gray blazer lowered his phone. Not because Marcus sounded threatening. He did not. His voice stayed calm, almost gentle. But there are moments when calm becomes stronger than anger. When respect stands so still that disrespect has to reveal itself. Rosa took another spoonful because Marcus had protected not just her hunger, but her dignity. Then she looked at the napkin in his pocket again, at the little purple heart meant for a child waiting at home. And she understood that this meal was not the last thing Marcus had. It was the last thing he could afford to give. And somehow he had given it without making her feel poor. Preston's smile thinned, and for the first time that night, irritation cut through the polish. He looked at Marcus more carefully, not as a stranger anymore, but as a problem he had seen before in another room under harsher lights. Webb, Preston said slowly. Marcus Webb. The waitress glanced up. The assistant manager shifted his weight. Marcus did not move. You work at the Route 9 distribution center, Preston continued, loud enough to make sure the names spread from booth to booth. Night shift. Loading dock. I remember now. Marcus's eyes stayed steady, but something tightened in his jaw. Rosa noticed it. So did Preston. You are the one who filed those ridiculous complaints, Preston said. The one who claimed edible food was being thrown away. Marcus answered quietly. It was not a claim. It was food. 3 words, plain and heavy. The diner seemed to shrink around them. Outside, the storm pressed hard against the windows. Inside, the air carried the smell of soup, coffee, and something colder than rain. Preston took one step closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound personal while still letting everyone hear. You know what I think? I think men like you love a cause because it distracts from failure. You cannot fix your own life, so you point at everyone else's. Marcus's hands relaxed at his sides. He did not defend his poverty. He did not list the shifts, the bills, the nights Amara slept warm because he stayed cold. A person with dignity does not always answer every insult. Sometimes he lets the insult stand there naked and ashamed of itself. But Preston was not finished. Tell me, Marcus, he said, tilting his head, is this how you feed your daughter? Giving away dinner to strangers so people can clap for you. The words landed hard. Rosa looked up sharply. Marcus looked down at the bowl, at the spoon in Rosa's hand, at the folded cornbread in his pocket with Amara's purple heart pressed against his chest. For one brief moment, pain crossed his face before he gathered it back into silence. Leave my daughter out of this, Marcus said. Why? Preston replied. She is part of the story, is she not? A struggling father, a sad little girl, a heroic bowl of soup. It is almost touching. A few people shifted in their seats, no longer amused. The waitress looked at the floor. The assistant manager swallowed. Even a man in the gray blazer lowered his phone as if the joke had soured in his hand. Rosa's fingers tightened around the spoon. She wanted to stand, to say her real name, to end it with one sentence. But something stopped her, not fear. Witness. She needed to see how far cruelty would go when it believed power was watching from its own side. Marcus spoke first. I do not need anyone to feel sorry for me. His voice was low, clear, and tired in a way that made the whole room listen. But she needed to eat. Preston gave a short laugh. There it is. The noble poor man. Then, with a careless sweep of his hand, he knocked the edge of the tray aside. The bowl tipped. Chicken soup spilled across the table, down onto the tile, and over the toe of Marcus's worn boot. No one laughed this time. The sound was small, almost nothing. Just ceramic scraping, liquid spreading, a spoon spinning once before it went still. But it felt like the loudest thing in the room. Marcus looked at the soup on the floor. He looked at Rosa, whose eyes were now wet with anger and grief. Then he bent down, picked up the spoon, and placed it gently back on the table. "You should not have done that," he said. Preston smirked. "What are you going to do?" Marcus reached for a stack of napkins from the dispenser and began wiping the floor himself, slowly, carefully. Not because Preston deserved it. Not because the diner deserved it. Because Amara had once asked him why people should clean up messes they did not make. And Marcus had told her, because the world gets better when someone chooses to. Rosa watched him kneel beside the ruined meal, protecting everyone's dignity except his own. And in that quiet act, she saw the truth more clearly than any report could have shown her. Preston Doyle had not just spilled soup. He had exposed the soul of the company she had trusted him to lead. Marcus finished wiping the floor while everyone watched in the kind of silence that does not forgive easily. The soup was gone, the bowl was empty, and the little purple heart in his pocket had a damp corner from the rain and the steam and the shame of the room. Rosa stood slowly, still wearing the gray coat, still playing the part of a woman with nowhere to go. But something had changed in her eyes. They were no longer tired. They were awake. "Thank you," she whispered. Marcus nodded once. "Find somewhere dry tonight." Preston laughed under his breath. "That is touching, truly. Now, both of you can leave." Marcus looked at him, not with anger, but with the worn patience of a man who had learned that pride can make a bad night worse. "Come on," he said to Rosa. "I can walk you to the bus stop." He reached into his pocket, pulled out the folded piece of cornbread, checked that it was still clean, and held it for a second like a father holding his last promise. Then he placed 2 quarters on the table, the only tip he could leave, and walked out into the rain beside the woman he thought was poor. Behind them, someone posted the video before the door had even swung shut. But the video did not show Marcus offering the meal. It did not show Preston insulting his daughter. It did not show the soup being knocked aside. It started with Marcus standing over the spilled bowl. Preston's voice calm and professional. The caption already written to make the world cruel in a different way. Angry warehouse worker causes scene at Calloway kitchen. By morning, it had been shared across Millhaven, then Atlanta, then beyond. People who had never been hungry decided what hunger should look like. People who had never carried a custody letter decided what kind of father Marcus must be, and some of the comments were not really about the video at all. At 6:10 in the morning, Marcus's supervisor called from the Route 9 warehouse. His voice sounded tired but not unkind. "Marcus, I have to suspend you. Pending review." Marcus sat at his kitchen table in the dim blue light before sunrise, still in the same clothes, his boots drying near the heater. "You saw the video. Human Resources saw it. There is more to it." A pause. "I believe you. But belief is not paperwork." Marcus closed his eyes. There was again. The world reduced to forms, clips, policies, and signatures. Across the room, Amara slept on the couch under a faded quilt because the bedroom window let in too much cold. Her drawing from last night lay on the table beside the manila envelope from Family Services. A house, a long table, 3 bowls of soup, 1 purple heart over the door. At 8:32, the phone rang again. This time it was Ms. Okafor from County Family Services. Her voice was careful, practiced, and heavy with procedures. "Mr. Webb, we received information regarding an incident at your workplace affiliate. Given the ongoing review, we will need updated proof of income and household stability." Marcus looked at the empty refrigerator, the unpaid electric bill, the cornbread wrapped in Amara's napkin. "How long do I have?" he asked. "Not long," she said gently. Amara appeared in the hallway then, small and barefoot, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Daddy." Marcus turned, forcing a smile that did not reach his face in time. She saw the envelope. Children always see what adults try to hide. "Are they going to take me away?" she asked. The question broke the room into pieces. Marcus stood and crossed to her, kneeling so his eyes were level with hers. He wanted to say no. He wanted to say never. He wanted to build a wall around her with nothing but his voice. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her and held on. Outside, Rainwater slid from the fire escape in slow silver drops. And somewhere far above the city, Diane Calloway was about to see the full video. Diane Calloway watched the edited clip once, then again, then a third time with the sound off, because lies often reveal themselves better in silence. She was back on the 38th floor before sunrise, still wearing the gray coat over her blouse, her hair damp at the ends, her shoes stained from the night rain. Her chief of staff, Marisol Vance, stood beside the conference table with a tablet in her hand and worry in her eyes. "The clip is spreading fast," Marisol said. "Preston's office is already calling it a customer safety incident." Diane did not look up. "Give me the store cameras. All of them. Every angle. Front counter, dining room, kitchen entrance, parking lot. Audio if they have it." Marisol hesitated. "Preston will ask why." Diane turned then, and the room seemed to cool around her. "Let him." 3 hours later, the truth arrived in separate files, each one stamped with a time code, each one colder than the last. Diane sat alone as the first video began. There was Rosa Bennett hunched in the corner booth. There was the waitress refusing a cup of coffee. There was Preston stepping in with his clean suit and cleaner cruelty. Then Marcus entered, tired shoulders, pharmacy bag, coins counted at the register, his meal paid for with the careful math of a man who could not afford mistakes. Diane leaned closer when he set the tray in front of her. No flourish, no performance, just mercy placed on a table. The next angle showed what the public clip had hidden. Preston speaking about Marcus's daughter. The tray being knocked aside. The soup spilling across tile and boot leather. Marcus bending down not to protest, not to shame anyone, but to clean the mess he did not make. Diane pressed a hand to her mouth. She had seen corporate fraud before. She had seen men bend numbers, bury complaints, polish ugliness until it looked like strategy. But this was different. This was the moment a company lost its soul in a bowl of soup. Then came the parking lot camera. Marcus walked Rosa to the bus stop beneath a broken awning while rain fell in bright lines through the streetlight. He took off his work jacket and draped it around her shoulders, even though he was already shivering. He waited until the bus came. He stepped back before she boarded, giving her space, giving her dignity, giving without asking for a name. When she was gone, he stood alone under the awning and pulled the folded napkin from his pocket. The cornbread inside was damp at the edge. He checked it anyway, carefully, hopefully, as if love could still be carried home even after humiliation. The little purple heart was visible for less than 2 seconds. Diane paused the video there. She stared at it until the room blurred. "Find him," she said. Marisol's voice softened. "Marcus Webb." "Yes." "For legal." Diane shook her head. "For justice." By noon, she had his personnel file, his complaint history, and the family services notice he had submitted when applying for emergency scheduling support. Preston had marked the request denied. Reason? Low priority. Diane read those words twice. Low priority. A widowed father trying to keep his daughter fed had been called low priority by a company built on feeding families. Outside her office, executives gathered for damage control, but Diane did not move toward them yet. She opened the final clip once more and watched Marcus place 2 quarters on the table after losing the only meal he had bought. He had been insulted, recorded, suspended, and still he left a tip. That was not weakness. That was character so deeply rooted that even shame could not pull it out. And in that quiet office high above the city, Diane Calloway finally understood the full measure of the man Preston Doyle had tried to make small. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, the regional boardroom at Calloway Foods was full of people who believed the meeting was about protecting the brand. Preston Doyle sat near the front with a legal folder open, his tie perfectly centered, his expression calm in the way guilty men sometimes practice in mirrors. Around him were directors, public relations officers, regional managers, and 2 attorneys who had already drafted a statement calling Marcus Webb's behavior unfortunate, disruptive, and inconsistent with Calloway values. Diane entered last. No tailored suit, no pelo e arrings, no polished armor. She walked in wearing the same faded gray coat from the diner, the cuffs still damp, the hem stained from the storm. Conversation faded at once. Preston stood halfway. Diane, we were just reviewing the incident. Sit down, she said. He paused. We have a strategy. No, she replied. You have a cover story. The room went still. Diane placed a small remote on the table, then looked toward the screen at the far wall. The first image appeared, the public clip, the one everyone had seen. Marcus standing near the spilled soup. Preston looking controlled. The caption accusing a warehouse worker of causing a scene. Preston cleared his throat. As you can see, he created a disturbance. Diane clicked again. A new video filled the screen. The room saw Rosa Bennett sitting alone in the corner booth. They saw the waitress refuse her. They heard Preston's voice say, "Do not feed her. She's not a customer." A few faces changed. Not much at first, just the slight lowering of a chin, the tightening of a mouth, the quiet discomfort of people recognizing truth before they were ready to name it. Diane clicked again. Marcus entered. He counted his coins. He paid for soup and cornbread. He turned at the sound of humiliation, walked across the room, and set down the only meal he had purchased. The audio was clear. "She's a customer tonight," Marcus said. No one in the boardroom moved. Preston leaned forward. "That angle does not show the full context." Diane looked at him. "Then let us keep watching." The next clip played. Preston mocked Marcus's job. Preston mentioned his daughter. Preston called his kindness sentimental nonsense. Then came a moment the tray tipped. The soup spilled, and Marcus, instead of shouting, bent down with napkins and cleaned the floor. The boardroom was so quiet that the air conditioning sounded like wind over an empty field. One attorney slowly closed his folder. A public relations officer looked at the statement in front of her, then turned it face down. Preston's confidence began to crack at the edges. "He filed false complaints," Preston said. "He made accusations against our food disposal process." Diane clicked once more. Photographs appeared. Sealed trays behind a store. Bags of edible bread marked for waste. Internal emails with Preston's approval attached. Then a scanned copy of Marcus's complaint, dated 6 weeks earlier, respectful, detailed, ignored. Diane's voice remained calm. "Mr. Webb told the truth before any of us were brave enough to hear it." Preston stood fully now. "This company cannot be run by emotion." Diane turned from the screen to him, and the gray coat suddenly looked less like a disguise and more like evidence. "This company sells food," she said. "If hunger does not move us, we have no business being in this business." No one applauded. That would have been too easy. Instead, something heavier settled over the room. The kind of silence that arrives when power finally loses its costume. Diane placed a printed document on the table. "Preston Doyle, effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Your authorization over regional operations is revoked, and the legal department will review every denied complaint under your supervision." Preston opened his mouth, but no words came. For once, the man who had always known what to say had nothing left. Diane faced the room again. "The advertising campaign is canceled. The budget will be redirected to a permanent community meal program at every Calloway kitchen location. Not for publicity, not for photographs. For people." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice softened. "And Marcus Webb will receive a public apology before sunset." On the screen behind her, the final paused frame showed Marcus's hand holding the folded napkin with Amara's purple heart. The richest room in the building stared at it in silence, and not one person dared call him poor again. The public apology reached Marcus's phone at 4:47, but he did not see it right away. He was sitting on the edge of Amara's bed, helping her tape a sheet of plastic over the drafty window, pretending it was a project instead of a problem. The apartment smelled faintly of toast, laundry, soap, and the chicken soup he had never brought home. Amara had been quiet since morning, the kind of quiet children use when they're trying not to make a worried parent more worried. Then someone knocked. Not loud, not official, just 3 gentle taps against the old wooden door. Marcus stood slowly, expecting Ms. Okafor or a landlord notice or one more piece of paper asking him to prove he was enough. But when he opened the door, Diane Calloway stood in the hallway. No gray coat this time. No these guys. No photographers behind her. Just a woman holding a covered dish of hot food in both hands and shame in her eyes. Marcus stared at her. Recognition came slowly then all at once. "Rosa," he said. She shook her head softly. Diane Calloway." Behind Marcus, Amara peeked around the kitchen doorway. Diane looked at the child and smiled with such tenderness that Marcus's guarded expression faltered. "I owe you both the truth," she said. Marcus did not invite her in immediately. A man who has been embarrassed by the world learns to be careful when the world returns with gifts. "Is this pity?" he asked. Diane's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. "No, this is justice coming late." She handed him a folder. Inside was a formal apology signed by Calloway Foods, confirmation that his suspension had been lifted, back pay approved, his complaints reopened, and a new position offered. Community meals coordinator for the entire region, with benefits, steady hours, and enough salary to make family services stop treating poverty like a character flaw. Marcus read the first page, then the second, but his hand stopped moving when he reached the part that said his name would be attached to a permanent program feeding families in need. "I did not ask for this," he said. "I know," Diane replied. "That is why it matters." Amara stepped forward then, holding half a cookie wrapped in a napkin. "Are you the lady Daddy gave soup to?" Diane knelt so they were eye to eye. "Yes, sweetheart, I am." Amara studied her for a moment, then held out the cookie. "We share things here." That broke Diane in a way no boardroom ever could. She accepted the cookie with both hands as if it were something sacred. Marcus looked away, not to hide weakness, but to give her privacy inside her gratitude. 6 months later, every Calloway kitchen in Georgia had one small table near the front window with a simple sign that read, "Reserved for anyone hungry." No purchase necessary, no explanation required. In the Millhaven location, beside that sign, there was a framed paper napkin with a purple crayon heart and a backward letter. Marcus never liked speeches, so he did not give one. He simply arrived each morning, checked the kitchen inventory, greeted the staff by name, and made sure no child, no parent, no tired stranger in a wet coat was ever treated like hunger made them less human. Preston Doyle's name disappeared from the company directory, but Marcus Webb's quiet dignity changed the way the company measured success. Not only in profit, not only in growth, but in warm bowls served, doors kept open, and people allowed to sit down before they had to prove they belonged. And Diane Calloway, who once disguised herself to find the truth, found something greater than truth that night. She found a black father who had almost nothing, yet gave like his heart, still believed the world could be redeemed. If this story touched you, share in the comments what you would have done if you saw Marcus give away his last meal. And tell us whether you believe one quiet act of kindness can still change a whole room. Thank you for watching until the end.